Fine. So I'm glad to be the part of this session 10, International Marketing for Logistics and Supply Chain Management. So this is the session of both the practices what we had in the previous modules and as well as the complexity what we faced in the module 4, module 3 and module 2 will be discussed briefly with the help of trade related measures and as well as the most awaited principles of WTO and as well as the consignments practices, how the consignments are planned and how the consignments are tracked from one source to other destination. So these are all the participants awareness what an individual must provide in order to enhance the logistical practices and also to provide some basic insights on how to inculcate the ideations of World Trade Organization and as well as the promotions behind it. So let me get into the session. So with respect to trade related investment measure, we must agree the specific sources which are all indicating the agreements are effect oriented. Let me start with an example. The trade related restrictions are also well connected with the permissible successive factors and as well as the permissible organizational elements that has to be encrypted, accepted, and has to be displayed without further confidential matters, which is prohibiting the progress of WTO. To be very precise, any organization adhering to the principles of WTO must certainly invest on trade related permissible activities. A company must plan for market, branding, digitalization, foreign trade investments, which are all directly connected, which are all indirectly connected. Every agreement what we provide that has to be successively planned, successively iterated, and provisionally shortlisted for that particular financial year planning. So any plan, since we are in the new financial year, the dissertation of any trade that is successively planned and related aspects of investment or changes of ownership or adhering to the marketing and branding principles alone without inculcating other strategies which were overflowed in overseas and as well as domestic markets. So, what are all the overflown agreements which are all highly connected to the investment measure should be shortlisted? And that duty is our own duty for directing our trade activities, which is not only making the company to invest on some external consultant activities, but also to invest on some specific related measures that has to be inculcated from a remedial action, not on a solutional perspective. So, with respect to multilateralism, what do we need to plan or what we need to adhere in order to engage the global trade into domestic trade and smaller region to larger region, how the regionalism and multilateralism plays a vital role in WTO automation. So, in this WTO automation, the establishment functions, which is broadening the international standard, which is differing from one agreement to other agreement. Suppose in the case of financial year plan, we have around 50 agreements. Not all the agreements are connected to the trade process alone. Some agreements are connected to establishment of new ventures or increasing the standard value or sharing of resources or market holding. So we have so many objectives which is to be planned as a primary, secondary, and tertiary constraints in multilateralism. That is what it was termed as multilateral. In all the verticals, we need to plan. In all the sources, we need to conquer data. In all the comparison, we need to have a standard rubrics and metrics to plan accordingly for mapping the standards towards trade and its objective. So let me be very clear on this trade and objective. Whenever we are in a legal framework, only we can adhere to WTO and their planning without a second opinion. I repeat the statement. A legal framework has to be categorized in such a way in order to dimensionalize the entire internal marketing, international marketing, whether it is a division, department, or a domestic terminal. We need to plan the rules and agreements to be in such a way, in a hierarchical way, in a schematic way, to be very precise in a schematic way that is to be adhered across various departments which is there in a particular company without any second opinion. That second opinion, if it is coming as a primary constraint, it will distort the entire objective of WTO and that will get redirected. And that might be in a wronger situation for taking a wronger decision as well. So, in all the parameters, there might be a trade block, there might be a speed breaker, and that speed breaker must reduce our flow, and that reduction of flow will also make us to divide the entire work. That is, delegation comes into role play and making the entire permissible function into real-time constraints. And those constraints might not be in a situation to take a wholesome activity. So legal perspective is segmented into five. That is liability as a first one. That liability is a legal framework. Getting into the next liability, we need to exhibit the function. How many exhibitions we are going to do, how many open scheme role plays we are going to do, and then governance activity, how we are going to govern the entire scheme of activities. So those governance activity has to be taken into consideration, and then we need to have accordance or alliances. Those alliances must also noted in order to ensure the correctness of the function, and then we are going to go for engaging lateralism. So that is what multilateral or unilateral activity, that lateral functions has to be taken into consideration for mapping the entire legal perspective. That is what the full form of purpose in this matter of concern. So you please keep it in mind while answering your questions. That is in like a short answer or big answer or whatever might be the part. Either it is a part A or part B or part C. Whenever you are answering any question, please follow these three rules in answering. Number one is synopsis. Have a perfect synopsis for the question of concept asked. Secondarily, please consider a schematic framework that will be included in our own PPTs with the help of infograph, mind maps, and so other criterion which is included in the notebook LM of the link what I have shared in the previous PPTs. Please adhere to a schematic presentation that is to be a key noted area for highlighting your area of concepts and as well as a framework. Tertiarily, kindly consider some applicational related activities as like giving full form like these kind of activity. So LEGAL, legal framework conquest, liability, how many exhibitions we are conducting, how many governance activities we are going on through, who are all the alliances with us, whether they are in mutual agreement or they are in one side agreement. We need to take a characteristic role play and then come to lateral functions, which are all playing a key role in standardizing the trade, which is differing from one area to other area. So these are all the segments which is to be noted down in order to ensure, in order to contour, ensure, enhance, and emphasize on demographical factor. That is what it has been displayed, differing from smaller regional agreements. So the sample size doesn't matter. Even if it is you're working for 50 or 500, 5,000, or even 5 lakh, the primary automational roadmap for your WTO activity must adhere to a legal structure. You must consult with a legal opinion, which is to be noted down on these five verticals. So planning on these five vertical will give you a mind map of how you're going to eradicate the block of trade which is happening between regions. Say like example, we have commutation between Karnataka, Andhra, Tamil Nadu, all the logistical matters of concern and hub centers are giving and taking multiple activities from all the three states. So whether it is an interstate or intrastate, the multilateral activity, what we are emphasizing from an electronic city, say like Bangalore, and nearby commercial cities, say like Kanchipuram, or going beyond it, getting into Chennai. So what are all the characteristic role play a multilateral element can do, and how it can emphasize on furthermore commercialization, for example, getting into some other segment like Andhra, or even more getting into the northern part of overall India. Those northern part connecting the other parts, which is demographically establishing a bridge between regionalization. And that regionalization eradicate trade block in such a way to broad, to enhance, to emphasize, to procure, to vendor, how the vendors are chosen, who are all the vendors, so how to identify those merchants. So that also to be the matter of concern for highlighting the trade related functions. So those trade related functions which are all categorized, which are all emphasized on segmental behavior, and then making a clear plan on how to identify the mappers or the influencers who is going to have a connecting line between these areas. Let me be very clear. The regionalism, the multilateralism, and as well as the overall conquer of data must not happen in a single day. It has to focus on some emphasized elements, and those emphasized elements will not get into a pure identification of successive planning. There might be some disturbances. Say, like a global trade grouping must not be identical. There might be a group of different mind factors. There will not be any global opportunity for all the groups. Say like example, if I have a group from Karnataka, if I have a group from Andhra and Tamil Nadu, not all the groups are identical in nature. They have different frameworks, they have different blueprints, they have different hierarchy. So they are in Karnataka there is no multilateralism focus because agreement are connected only within the intra level. There is no interconnection. If there is no interconnection, it matters only in that particular area the cost of living is more because of characterization and trade-off. So when I get into the agreement, which is mutually connecting the investment measure, that is trade-related investment measure, which is to be planned and forecasted and predicted long back for connecting the future roadmap of today's trade agreements. In 2000, majority of merchants in Kanchipuram and other allied areas where silkworming has peak in constraints, peak in identification. It was in long back of planning. The roadmap of silk and the weavers of the entire Kanchipuram city is planned in such a way. Now, in the last 25 years, in the entire segment of 25 years, the entire vendors of silk weavers and the other handloom activities are predominantly giving a phenomenal role in agreeing the global markets as well. And they are the exempt policies of those weavers in today's market is exemplary good, except for few. So the exemplary phenomenal practices what they had in today's agreement is not a single day's plan. So it was planned in such a way the functioning mind map of the entire practices which is peak noted, and that peak point and that peak market entry is adapted and then it is promoted. So the practices what we had in today's market is not one day's activity. The peak market, the practices what we discussed in the previous session, that is practices to policy, P2P. And this P2P matters a lot. These are all the most important key phrases must be kept in mind before answering any question in this particular segment. So the module 5, connecting global markets with these kind of association, they are seeking support. So these are all the influencers and supporters to help them and to lift them up in all the four directions. So the dimensionalization, the navigation, global market grouping, and all the functionalization elements are getting clear mapping into the total number of 360-degree appraisal factor. And that 360-degree focus is not such an easy thing. what we are struggling to do in our own office. Having 50 employees, 360-degree appraisal is tough task for us. Having more and more companies, seeing n number of samples, and having the same pattern again and again is not that easy. But we need to make it up, and we need to have a consistent follow up in making all the relevant features in order to engage the business blueprint is followed successively. So slowly we are moving to the frame of specification which is affecting the market strategy. So when we plan for balancing and avoiding these kind of prohibitions, so what can be done, or what are all the precautionary measure to be taken in order to identify the localized interrupters? So the localized interrupters must be thrown away. So those localized interrupters must be identified, and we need to distinguish whether they are applicable or non-applicable. After distinction between these applicable and non-applicable, we are specifically focusing on market strategy, which is demographically planned, globally materialized, quality analyzed, direct impacting. All these parameters have been checked, and finally, it is giving you a price. Say like 10,000 rupees per silk saree. So silk saree, say for example, silk saree starts from 3,000 and it goes up to 3 lakhs. So we may have beyond 3 lakhs also. If I have a highly prepared silk saree, I may go for. Allowances will not have a barrier. So if I go for 4 lakhs or 5 lakhs also, I may get a silk saree which is so very precious and so very perfectly maintained, and the perfect quality and the micro level finishing will be to their peak notch, and the top notch peak impact will make the product to reach global market. So the force the company must create in order to make the product reach not only to the localized level, but also to reach the global level. The supply chain and sourcing talks in such a way, the pricing strategy will not only have the quality of the product alone, but also the requirement of the product and the rules that the force of a company must create, and depend on the product whether the product will give me back again. If I have the confidence of selling a silk saree for 3 to 4 lakhs and the people are ready to purchase it, this allowable quality transparency and quality export import balancing will make a country to feel proud about their product, stating that their state or their district related product has significant role play in the global market. So we have patents, we have IPR, we have all the copyrights for making all the relevant measures, where we have all the possible and promoters in and around Kanchipuram. And similar to Kanchipuram, we have other area where silk weaving is in peak also, but people are not aware about it. As like Kanchipuram, globally renowned place, we have other place called Tiruppuvanam, which is nearby Mayiladuthurai district, where we have lot of people involved in silk weaving. And those people who are involved in silk weaving follows the same traditional practices, but global markets does not approach it. So that is what regionalism. This regionalism plays a vital role, where the northern part of Tamil Nadu is damn growing in trade and related activities, whereas the southern part of Tamil Nadu follows the commercial lens, follows the practices. They are doing very good in domestic terminals when we compare with the northern Tamil Nadu. So the global market entry is highly possible and highly predominant in northern part of Tamil Nadu rather than southern part of Tamil Nadu. So as of our Tamil Nadu is concerned, we have 4 divisions. Out of 4 major divisions, 2 major divisions, one ruling global market, the other ruling domestic market. Market entry and the market penetration does not prioritize only on these area. There might be some plan and there might be some segment which is highlighted, and which is not only planning on global market alone, but also interfering in the local market too. So, in this criterion, we must go with the adhering policy, adhering template, and that template must go through these data. So, this is the factor what we need to identify and understand. A company's policy is not that damn close for us to engage with the imbalances. First of all, let me start with the regionalism. regional identity. It is also and what we need to throw away or ignore in order to engage the trade activities to the top notch. And the mechanisms what we adhere, and as I told, reliability, and what are all the alliances, and what are all the governances, and what are all the exhibitions we are going to do, and then only we are going to take into the lateral activity. And those regulatory framework must understand their strategy, and based on the strategy the market can be analyzed with the plus and minus of their international market and trade. So international market and trade is aligned on these six variables which is directly dependent to each other. So as you people are aware about research methodology in your sem 2, which is going to be planned in such a way to identify the dependent variables and independent variables for your research. So taking research on international market as of my subject is concerned, if I suggest you a research problem statement, these six variables could be the better possible dependent variable for you to take any kind of questionnaire also. So as I have already shared you the article and the case study, which are all directly connecting different possible analysis. As of my article is concerned in the last previous year, 2025, there was an IoT based automation related automobile manufacturing companies effectiveness. Similarly, you may take international trade of any product, any fast moving consumer good, and may relate all the six dependent variable with any independent variable like demography or trade fair or trade agreements or WTO principles. You may connect these six variables with any independent variables and you go for any correlation or regression. You may identify hypothesis and you can identify the result significant to 95 percentage of success rate and having 5 percentage of tolerances. So that is also the other side of the coin. So you not only analyze the answers of the questions alone, but you can also explore how the variables are connecting to the core and the competency of those variables are mapped, aligned, and standard are also in contact with the variables. So let me get into the next frame. So specifically the market strategy, which are all aligned, inflowing, outflowing, after exposing to the variables and before exposing to the variables. So the before slide, what we had with respect to variables, and after getting into those analysis and restrictions, how the variables are limited and how the variables are connected, whether the variables are mostly preferred from the regional segment or not. If not, how the variables can be well thrown. So, in order to engage the supply chain and sourcing and import balancing, the frame discussed about the pricing strategy. In order to ensure the governmental restriction and the exchange of inflows and outflows, the financial planning has to be changes are very well planned. There is a critical rate and there is EDD, expected date of delivery, and there must be LST, that is the longest survival time and shortest survival time, SST and LST. The shortest survival time reveals the product's capability or the compatibility with the existing competition. The longest survival time reveals the product value. Even after so many competition, if the product could capable of sustain in the market, the profit what we expect or what we confer will not be dependent only on the target market but also on the other markets also. So to be very precise, the exchange rates in the previous frame, what we had a discussion about supply chain and sourcing and as well as exim balancing. In the current frame, we are discussing about the host government, whether they are limiting or giving the open access. If there is a limitation, the company and the government is facing a loss condition. If there is an acceptance open factor, the company is ready to face any challenges because they have a strong treasury. If the treasury is strong, if the profit and the loss condition can be accepted, then we can exchange more number of access, more number of target markets, more number of exploration without any remedial measure or without any permissible or restrictions. So there is no need of any permission to get into a new conquering or a new exploration or a new acquirement of a policy. That is what the frame is discussing and the frame is emphasizing all about. So once after meeting all the requirements, we must be in a situation to analyze the market policy and the market trend is economically planned in such a way and notable in such a way for emerging international markets. So those markets are highlighted and mostly connected to the engaging practices and the literal plan and the verticals what we had in the first frame. That was all the five verticals must note down the policy and the real-time fundamental or mostly preferred from one zone to the other zone. Those segmental activity are connected to the mostly specific role play of these three values, that is trend setting, how the trend setting values can be done. That is nothing but a trend analysis. So how the trend analysis can go ahead. So what are all the role play individual can go for. So how was the trend analysis in the previous iteration? How the market current short term, mid term, long term policies are, whether there is an essential, valuable or role play have been done already. If not, who is the role setter? So these things of statement, I need to plan it in a landscape, and that landscape cannot be changed because it's from one time to another. I may not have the same situation through the entire study. It may have some rulings and differences, and those rulings and differences, and those things must also make us to stand in the way to understand position, to get into the role play, and then planning a very good agreement on play related. So once after determining the margin of safety in a trade related settlement can be equipped and enhanced in a very good way, and a successful planning can be done in a phenomenal and significant way for us to control the loss and to engage the business in a profitable condition. Even if it is not a profitable, at least we may plan and the directional shift to eradicate the drivers of these things. So, as far as drivers of quality is concerned, we may have a poor control between multilateralism and lateralism of region. Sir, is my voice clear now, sir? Am I audible now? Fine, fine. There might be some network issues. Fine. Thank you. So, with respect to have a poor survey and as well as a very good survey between any two segment, the diversification of any analysis between the trend analysis and as well as the open market check, that could be a surveyed statistics which is playing a good role in significant mapping between any and as well as the trend spot, which is the right trend spotting for us to note down the predictive models. That is how we discuss analytics, business analytics, in our research, as well as fundamentals. So, as of our MBA is concerned, both analytics and research are the two eyes of MBA today market competition. If a PG scholar is having sufficient input of research methodology and business analytics, there is no need to have a long last plan of business market. Either it is an employability or a business, we may have sufficient information if I have a strong in these two areas. So successive planning is possible only with the help of these two segments, and these two segments are highlighted in such a way to plan basic query. So let me start with the basic query. So as you people are aware about the regionalism, as I told, the dimensional check, which option relate to the core of regionalism in international trade? whether it is policies of economic balances or trade policies or the transition or prohibition. I need your options. Which option connect to the core, which is highlighting to the maximum of making a right participation underlying the deletable or the engageable activity. So this particular activity on segment coordinating or transition. Your options. So the option A talks about economic policy of group of countries. So the questions we are having in our either the option relate to the question or not to the question. Either way, it is ranked. So the characteristic of regionalism is economic policy. I agree with you. The other point is listed as like B, C, D. It is also a part of regionalism, but it is an adverse effect. The first option is a characteristic. The second option is the adverse effect. The transition is the either adverse effect or the acceptable effect. And the last option is again an adverse effect, prohibition. So the coordination of economic policy and as well as the group of countries, uh, the regional plan or way to connect the economic policies or damn true when we compare global trade markets and increasing the trade blocks. So when we try to increase the trade block, these are all the positive area where we can connect them with the core competency. So again, coming to the core competency. So what could be the core competency of the market trend and how the market trend can be analyzed with the help of pipelining. So whether the executional steps are varying or not, I need to recheck it with the help of some pipeline activity, and those pipeline activities are well sequentially planned. So let me get into one by one. First one is environmental audit. So as we plan and way for engaging the environmental plan and the audit, which is analyzing and segmentalization being done, then it is giving me a clarity. If not, I need to change now. So when we try to state the reason, uh, help plan, help connect, then only we are making. Sir, now it is audible, sir. In my area, it is fine. Network correct. Whether it is audible now, fine. So with respect to the environmental audit and environmental connect, the target market and as well as the regional constraints are still prevailing. There is no second opinion about pipeline system because whatever comes in, whatever goes out has to be recorded. So the deploying factor, which is localized market research, which is validating the demand, which is emerging the zone right from zone 1 to zone N. All the zones are course controlled by a feasible research outcome. And you can take a designation of feasible researcher in order to explore more and more what are all the trend analysis which is in the previous frame to connect the local bodies to the terminals which are all overseas connection. Agreeing to the legal localization and getting into a entry mode and finally getting into promotional market mix which is adapted where price, product, place and promotions are culturally into connection. I repeat, taking from audit environmentally and getting into a research and then making a localized environment which is planned in such a way for mapping a data which is again relatable with the help of new plans and procedures where P2P will be predominant, underline the word, will be more predominant between stage 2 and stage 3. So let me come again. In between the stage 2 and stage 3, if the P2P is rulable market, then the entry mode selection will be very easy because licensing and JVs, that is, we discussed about integrated joint ventures in session 4 and session 5 and all. So those IJVs and those direct investment will become very easier because of TRIM's significances. Trade related investment measures are very significant because of implementing P2P and then time to trade and trade to trend, T to T and as well as T to T. So P2P and T to T will give you a category of pure entry without a bias. Without a bias, if you are giving a new entry, then comes the market adaptation without a second opinion. So this flow of pipeline is the most important frame for your preparational of answers. Let me get into the next question. This particular question, WTO influencing the market strategy. So already we had an influence of market strategy in the two frames. So with respect to the previous frame, what could be the survey where we are directly inculcating some activities, either option A, option B on funding, C on frameworks, and D on fixed prices. So I need your options. With respect to four options, what could be the correct relatable option WTO is influenced by market strategies? How they can ensure the correctness and the rectifications of business practice? Your options on Q, others, option C. Again, a legal framework. Fine. The answers of this particular question are well connected to option C, whereas the first option focus on funding and as well as advertisement. Since the question is of marketing strategy, funding alone can be the odd man out. Stating like B and D can be the odd man out, whereas A and C can be the pickable answer. Since it is talking on WTO along with international market strategy, there must be a framework which is resoluting the mechanism of trade. Then only we can make it as a open mandate language. First of all, in open mandate, we must represent some legal policies, and that legal policy must be there in LOC, that is in letter of credit. We must mention that there is a common universal language which is being mandated. Without mentioning E, we may not take option A, since the rank is 2, 4, 1, 3. So the ranking of options will be in such a way 2, 4, 1, 3, since option C is the right option. So for every MCQ, please have omission of wrong answers first or poor ranking of wrong options first, then get into right options. Don't ever get into the right options immediately, so that we may have a strong foundations of market research that could analyze us in all the dimensions. So getting into market research, in the pipeline we had a feasible research. Now we are getting into the market research. Market research is something analyzing and identification of dynamic factor in environment, but taking on a right opportunity at a right point of time. This is not only a significant study of area, but also the goal of every marketer. So as a marketer, I should market my knowledge management to the other PG scholars, whether it is global market or a local market. I need to market my thought process. Similarly, as a marketer who was involved in productification, who was involved in linkages, who was involved in intra or interconnection, must engage, must analyze, must go through the past data, and then only they need to direct themselves in identification and analyzing in the future roadmap. If at all the study research area is static, there is no need to work on and make the dynamic approaches which are stringent. There is nothing about past data and present data comparison. If the work is dynamic, we must compare the past and present data where understanding will be broader. So we need to make one thing clear whether the research is static or dynamic, we need to categorize it. And then we need to go for a trade block analysis. After making key area conclusional analysis, then we take a stand stating that the market is a linking factor between static and dynamic. Then we have broader goals. We have market opportunities. We have overseas categories. So these are all the takeaway a global marketer must ensure, must connect, must go through these statements in their LOC, that is letter of credit, before getting into any mutual agreement of trade related investment measure. I repeat, trade related investment measure must be mutually gone through on either area, either party, and then they agree to the dynamic factor, which is a competitive role play, which is a mobilized role play, where we can sign and agree to the statement of shifting one market to the other market linked to the broader zone. So, broader zone in the sense opportunities are wider, but the entry level is something broader where we don't know where to go in and where to go out. So the broader zone confuses in such a way because too many of openings will have a dynamic shift, and that shift will not give us a clarity where to get in and where to get out. So that might be the problem. Apart from that, there could not be any issues on these kind of connections. And getting into the next role play, this is a pyramid of any market which is internationally connected to the role player, to the validator, to the allocator, to the most significant role player of a particular zone. So I make sure the well connected role player of any segment which is highlightable to the market, which is segmentally focusing on and then making a real time understanding between the strategic focus, strategic identity, strategic development, and then making a very good notable validatable element which is demonstrating a practical application. So these are all the things must be done from your end. So if you are doing it without a doubt on secondary option, then the strategic options and the highlightable options can be betterly prospectively done for hiring new employees, for engaging new agreements, for validating poor trade growth. Then if the trade growth is poor, you can go for a new futuristic approach. And that futuristic approach can also be validated with the new examples and real-time case studies. So those real-time case studies and those real-time approachabilities are highlighted again and again for mapping a new zone. And that new zone must be demonstrated very well before getting into international market. So people are very clear stating that how many policies and how many categories can be done and make sure that the policies are mostly preparable in all the zones. So mostly it is connected to the zone, mostly it is demonstrating, but lesserly it is focusing on validation. So since I prompted mostly two times, it is properly gone through all the data, but when it comes to validation, it is not doing the activity as planned. So here we need to correct it in the different perspective, different analysis, different category, and then we need to go for the strategic focus, strategic development, which are all overseas opportunities and demonstrating the practical application. So the plannable activities are also made strategically impactable, and the strategic effects of trade related investment measures are purely connected to the new zone. So these four are the four takeaways of security control systems of trade related market. So, for example, as we inculcate antivirus software in our PCs, it is something a preventive measure, which is consolidating the host control to be more predominant rather than foreign exchanges or the foreign interferences will make us to, systematically down, make us to get into the poor efficiency. So, with the eliminating the local content. So, usually we go licensed version rather than pirated version. Similarly, in trade also, we must eliminate the pirated versions. The pirated versions in the same, we must go for liable or a relatable purchaser or the vendor where the supply chain efficiency which is ensured only if the host government. That is what we discuss in the legal G. That is the governance part should be done effectively. Without doing the governance part, you cannot survive in any balancing activity, which might be in a poor zone or which might be in a poor segment where we are not adhering to the efficient part because we don't have standard. That is the most important first point. Second point, prohibition. When it goes for volume or value from one segment or a consignment to the other consignment or the segment, the firm's access to the imports has to be restricted. But it is not so. We must restrict. Why? If I try to restrict it, it does not only increase the volume. Say, like if I can logistically connect it to one zone to other zone, I can commute to only 2 tons in a single shift. If I commute 4 tons by adding 2 tons extra in a single shift, it is not restricted by volume or value, whereas we are restricting the repeatable commutation, what we plan in the same zone. In order to avoid the repeatable commutation and in order to avoid the repeatable engagement practices, we are in a segment of avoiding the inflation rate. And that is also making us to get through the poor inflation and deflation rates. Since we plan financially, restrictions are not only financial restrictions but also on volume restrictions. And that might reduce the firm's capability and firm's reputation. That is the second most important point. Coming to the third point, majorities of host nations are not directly accessing towards the investor, since the middleman concept is somewhere the other, it is interrupted and it is disturbing the smoothness of data. Since we talk about foreign exchange neutrality, the host nation from the restricting zone have known intermediary or an unknown intermediary who is directly or indirectly connected to the necessary imports activity, and that reduces the investor directly to the one who is known, well-renowned, reliable, dependable individual, where we are avoiding the intermediary, then it is going to be a successful, efficient foreign exchange neutrality. Unless and until if I have a middleman concept in the international market, foreign exchange markets, I need to throw away the policy what we have it as imbalances. The imbalances will be there because of third party involvement. So the host nation must conquer the data from the other host nation where restriction will be on both the data of nations, not on the intermediaries' past and present data. And that is the third most important point, which is to be noted down. And last point, that is how well the national treatment of safeguarding is exchangeable. Who is the favorable and who is the unfavorable market reader? So let me be very clear on it. So when we conquer the data between any segment of highlightable factor, we need to plan in such a way for noting down the relevant measures which are all increasing and which are all possibly connecting to the market study and as well as the role player of next most important analyzer. And that analyzer must be in a situation to highlight the practices and the policies which are all to be connected zone. And after making a poor connection, then getting into the host nation, we need to have a retaliation or a replay of those data. And then we need to connect with the efficient. So both the involvement of individual practices and also the involvement of national treatment and investment, we must adhere to the foreign exchange possible local domestic firms and foreign exchange zones as lesser favorability. Why it is mentioned as lesser favorability, which is to reduce the bias. The favorability has to be reduced because of reducing the bias, not on reducing the exim policies or not on reducing the trade related measure. So we need to make sure that the content mandate or the mandatory disclosure what we have or what we thoroughly analyze must conquer, must understand whether the market value is properly done with the new equipment or not. If not, I need to change the remedial measure. So, how the remedial measures are well driven and well planned in such a way to categorize and to demonstrate the business hostings without a second opinion. Because every business demonstration starts with the volume to value. As we discussed about policy to purchase, policy to portfolio, lot of transition rates. But not all highlighted. There might be some issues who are correct. There are some interrogational measure which is elements. So the foreign trade must base and those database must be conquering without a developable and non-developable area. So when we try to develop an area and a non-developed area, we must be some exchangeable and non-exchangeable zones. So in order to get better clarity on these 3 points alone, let me share a scholar link. So this is going to be a Google Scholar link of mine in which we can take an article which is relevant to the data and as well as the measure of that particular concept, and then getting into a real-time understanding of how it is allocated between one zone to other zone. So this particular allocations, what you can connect it with the zone will give you a category of how research activities are well planned and who are all the planners and policy makers of trendsetters in a new market. So those trendsetters in a new market will give you a clarity of how we are suggesting the researches. Since we talk about market research, I have given this. You can allocate a citational oriented research review that is to be noted down, and market related research can go with any discipline. It is on logistics, it is on materials management, it is on material shortlisting area, or else you can go with the new innovation. So, the strategic effect of trade related investment measure can be on any side. It need not follow on a single path. The ensuring capability can be done on any side. The trade balances can be done on any side, and there must not be any restrictions furthermore. So, these are all the valuable inputs which is regarding to module 5. With this, we'll close for today. Any doubts on this? I have shared you the presentation. I have shared you the link of mine. You can access the data, articles, at least have a list of 5 articles related to your international market where you can search and you can connect with the market research, which will be helpful for your project. If at all any doubt on this frame, you can unmute and you can go ahead with your queries. In another 3 sessions, we'll be consolidating all the syllabus. In the next session, the syllabus will be completed. And in the coming 11 and session 12 case studies and recap session has been planned. So in another 3 more sessions, the entire session discussion will be completed. So with this, stop. Any doubts on session 9? Any doubts? Thank you.